You may or may not have heard of a little game called Honkai Star Rail. Just a few times. It's the most recent golden goose of the gacha industry, made by MiHoYo, a company famous for their hit game Fly Me to the Moon. And we all know that was great and all, but is the new game about stars and stuff any good, or is it overhyped? The internet seemed to love it at launch, but a few weeks in, and prevalent streamers have started to quit.
I think I just won't stream it anymore. I may play it on the side and maybe I'll make some videos on it. I just don't think I can stream it because I will rage every time.
Or worse, call it mid in a YouTube video. So what's the deal here? Is it Genshin 2? Or is it Genshin 2? I, Dio, have taken the plunge for all of you, cleared the story, found every chest, and farmed more relics than I'd like to admit. And after all of that, I want to be brutally honest. I did not enjoy Genshin Impact. It's been a couple years, so maybe the magic is worn off for most people, but the launch of Genshin really was something special for the mobile community. The graphics were better than almost anything in the market. The exploration was fun, and not just fun for a mobile game, but genuinely fun. And perhaps most importantly, Liso rock climbing. I don't even need to play the audio, you know what I mean. But after a few months, the game got tiring. Daily missions were a chore, events were half-baked, and it felt bad to give money to a company with some of the worst monetization I'd ever seen. And that's coming from a degenerate that's played Gacha for years now. So do you have any idea how painful it is to come here years later just to tell you that so far, Honkai Star Rail is a very good game? Gameplay is often the most important thing in a video game, but if I've learned a single thing about the gacha community, it's that y'all built different. Some of you will spend money just to invalidate interesting gameplay. So let's skip right into the good stuff, and by that I mean the story and the $300 PNGs. Quick summary of the intro. You are the Trailblazer, an intergalactic raccoon with amnesia and an atomic bomb inside of you. After being abandoned by your parents, you're quickly adopted by some strangers and brought aboard their Star Rail train, Honkai. From there, you and your new friends will go on wacky adventures across the galaxy. Personally, I think the intro and the main hook for the story is actually quite good. Who, or even what are you? Why do you have a space bomb inside of you? And mommy? Oh, nah, I'm sorry. Mother? These are all interesting questions, but ones we don't have the answers to just yet. In the meantime, the bulk of the story will mostly consist of journeying to several planets and helping the locals file their taxes and stuff. The taxes were a joke, MiHoYo? Please don't. The sci-fi setting of Star Rail is used to give the scope of the story a massive feeling. You're not dealing with countries, but planets and massive space stations. Because there's no need to connect the individual chapters to one another, every planet is allowed to be very creative with their environments, aesthetics, technologies, and waifus. The obvious downside of this being that every chapter and planet feels very self-contained and disconnected from each other. So far at least. At launch, there are 2.5 different worlds to explore, and each of them feels very distinct from one another. Now, we only have access to the opening chapters of a live service game, so I can't give a full in-depth review of the main story. As I mentioned before, I think that the intro does give us some interesting questions, but whether or not we'll actually get good payoff to those later down the line is in God's hands. That being said, and without going into any major spoilers, what we do have of the main story has been very impressive for this type of game. Overall, I'd say that the first couple chapters are perfectly fine, a 7 out of 10. And if you think a 7 out of 10 is a bad score,
honey, you've got a big storm coming.
Do you truly understand how impressive it is for a JRPG gacha to have a perfectly fine first couple chapters? Fate Grand Order, Arknights, Octopath, Not You, and even Genshin itself are all games with stories that I would consider good. But they all take their sweet time getting there.
No, for the last time, Paimon is not emergency
Are you
food.
sure about that?
While I love Frost Nova and Camelot as much as the next addict in denial, gachas specifically have a tendency to be in the One Piece club. Even single-player JRPGs with really good stories tend to have issues with slow starts that drag on for way too long. So I unironically mean it when I say that it is frankly amazing that Star Rail's first couple chapters have managed to be pretty good overall with a few hype moments. For example, the chapter that has the most content at the moment is Piltover and Zaun. Belobog and the Underground. They are two cities that are separated by wealth inequality in a world of eternal winter. You and the Honkai Express come down and try to save the world and help the people with their problems. Without any real spoilers or any more context, I can tell you that the story takes just about the exact route you would expect given that description. They pretty much tell you who the main villain is right at the start of the chapter, and they heavily hint at why she's doing what she's doing. It's not groundbreaking or deeply thought-provoking, but it also doesn't need to be, because it's the opening chapter of a grand space epic that will last years. You could say me praising the game for having a story that's not bad is the Stockholm speaking.
Maybe.
But you're a gacha game player, so I know you have no room to talk. All that being said, I am extremely optimistic about the future of this game's story, because while the main quest is just okay so far, the side quest and the exploration of the worlds have been fantastic.
Sorry, pain! Sorry, ouch, pain, sorry.
Who could have guessed that if there was one thing Genshin devs knew how to do right, it was drive exploration. That, and make me rethink my life decisions. Star Rail's exploration is much more on rails when compared to an open world like Genshin or Breath of the Wild. Levels are more like mazes or dungeons, but exploring every alley and looking in every corner is surprisingly rewarding. Very often, straying just off the beaten path will result in optional treasure, bosses, and puzzles, as one might expect of a JRPG. But every now and again, you might find a fun Easter egg, interesting bits of lore, or entire hidden quests that aren't marked on the map. You can join secret societies and find joke endings to the game. There's even a multi-part hidden quest that's a direct reference to Bloodborne of all things. And stumbling upon these by accident while exploring is really satisfying. Star Rail's side content in general really feels like the highlight of the game for me. By far, it's the section where the writers were allowed to pour in all of their weird and interesting ideas. Should you tell an android that thinks that they're human that they're not? What does robot sentience look like, and how do we deal with it? Why does the main character seem really attracted to trash cans? These are hard questions to answer, but in the side content, the game does let you answer them. Many side quests have multiple endings, and your choices will actually have permanent results. Some characters will move where they stand in the overworld, go to jail, or even die depending on your choices. While these have no real connection to the main quest, they go a long way in making the world feel interactive and alive. I mean, any game where I can just walk up to a table, steal a guy's phone, and watch lewd K-dramas on it gets my stamp of approval.
Approved!
Star Rail also has multiple fully voiced companion missions, where it slows down and spends its time fleshing out some of the characters that don't really get much of a spotlight in the MSQ. Now, it's doing this to try to make you roll on the gacha, and we'll get to that. But these companion missions can hit surprisingly hard, and just like the side quests seem to be a cut above when it comes to writing. In summary, Star Rail has a lot of interesting characters and stories to tell, if you're willing to go looking for them. Ships that grow out of supernatural trees, mortals that became gods out of sheer force of will, mahjong tiles that can kill space dragons. Okay, whales and collectors, we're gonna talk about gameplay now.
Stop it, Patrick, you're scaring him!
Ho ho ho!
Star Rail is a turn-based RPG. Each character has 2 abilities, some passives, and an ultimate. Compared to games like Persona and Xenoblade, that might sound like a very small list of abilities, because it is. While the combat systems do get more complex when you factor in things like elemental weaknesses, break bars, skill point management, and whatever this is.
This is not
The core of the combat does heavily rely on systems that have been around for decades. And that doesn't mean the gameplay is bad, it's just simple. To some, that can even be a positive. It's fast, easy to understand, and between the unique enemy mechanics and team synergies, there's usually enough going on to stay engaging. And for my true non-thinkers out there, the game has auto battle, a thing that makes both grinding and the daily quest a lot less annoying than certain other games. On the opposite end, if you really want a challenge, the game does have some rather difficult optional content, and it also allows you to attempt content that you are way underleveled for. Now, as with most gachas, the real meat of the combat system isn't this screen at all, it's this one. Team and character building is where most of the system's complexities are actually hiding. Units tend to have specific niches, such as being really good at AoE, debuffing enemies, or even... And between craft essences and equipment, there's a decent amount of character customization. Do you prefer crit chance or crit damage? Do you want your healer to heal better or do their best John Wick impression? The equipment, or relic system, is a close copy of Genshin's artifact system, and by that I mean it's a RNG fiesta, where each piece of gear has a random set of stats that randomly increases when you upgrade them. Because you can't fully control your equipment, this is where a lot of the endgame grind comes in, trying to weigh your desire for the perfect piece of gear against your willingness to slam your head into a wall. But with enough luck, or time, you can make multiple builds for a character that make them feel meaningfully different in combat. Truthfully, I don't know why I even wasted my time explaining all of that to you, because instead of theory crafting, most of you will just let some VTuber explain what the best gear, talents, and teams are.
So pretty much, you get more damage, and then that makes you do more damage.
But just like with the optional difficult content, the complexity is there if you want it. The sheer number of free characters that Star Rail gives you also helps team building significantly. The game gives you 8 different 4 stars and 1 honorary 5 star later on in the story. This gives you a lot of different elements and classes and archetypes up front to play around with and build teams around. All of that without having to rely on La Criatura. What's even more impressive is that with one notable exception, every single one of those characters that they gave you for free is unironically good. On principle, I can't call a game with this thing free-to-play friendly, but Star Rail is certainly taking several steps in that general direction. If I had one overarching criticism of the combat, team building, and gear systems, it's that they're all very safe. It's 2023, Sword Art Online released over a decade ago, and most people already know if the words turn-based combat with RNG gear stats excites them or sends them into a coma. And Star Rail isn't doing anything extremely new to change people's minds on that matter. Oh, and for the love of everything that is holy, why are there no gear sets?
Why are you the way that you are? I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
The Gatcha. Oh, the Gatcha. How statistically we love and hate you at the same time. Your existence probably gives devs enough money to make the games in the first place, and yet you also manage to continuously find new and inventive ways to destroy my mental. If you want to know if this game's gacha system's good or bad, it's bad.
It's not worth it!
Unfortunately, Star Rail copied Genshin's gacha system, so if you know, you know. But for those of you that are blessed enough to be out of the loop, let me paint you a picture. The base rate for an SSR is worse than Fate Grand Order, a game that released in 2015 and is notorious for its punishing gacha. Star Rail does have a pity system that guarantees you'll get an SSR within 70 to 90 pulls. However, the rate up for SSRs is 50%, so good luck with that. The only truly redeeming quality is that if you fail the first coin flip, you're guaranteed to get the rate up SSR within the next 70 to 90 pulls.
But wait!
After making 180 summons for a single SSR, you might notice this fun little page. Eidolons are this game's dupe system, like constellations or potential. And a certain game made by a certain company has a track record of being extremely annoying with these. They have a habit of releasing borderline unfinished characters and locking any semblance of their viability behind getting multiple copies of them. Thankfully, Star Rail specifically at launch seems to have much more restraint in this regard than its predecessor. So far, most Eidolons are just generic increases to stats. They make the characters better, but they importantly don't make them more fun or mechanically interesting. There are a few that I would consider borderline, but if this is the worst that it gets, then it's a lot better than locking a healer's resurrect behind getting 6 copies of them. To zoom out and look at that pretty picture I've been painting, you don't get many SSRs. When you do, it's probably not the one you want. When it is, you might need more than one copy to make them viable or to get their full kit. To add the cherry on top, the game is rather stingy with its premium currencies, and their prices are frankly insane. Do not pass go, do not collect $200 even though we both know you already have. Who would have guessed that if there was one thing Genshin devs knew how to do wrong, it's the endgame. Going through the main story is fun and takes somewhere between 15 and 20 hours to complete. Going back and exploring all those areas is even more fun. But after that, there's not really much to do. Now to be fair, most gachas end up in a similar situation. But between the slow daily regeneration of stamina and the steep increase in cost of character progression, Star Rail specifically starts to feel like a massive slog in the endgame. I heavily assume that this is a result of the game having a much smaller cast of characters when compared to other gachas. Besides character progression, there is some actual endgame content, mainly the Forgotten Hall and the Simulated Universe. The Forgotten Hall and its older brother Nightmare Land are a series of difficult stages that you have to beat within a certain number of turns. It's challenging and fun, but you only have to clear each stage once. Simulated Universe, on the other hand, is actually a bit of a highlight. It's a permanent roguelike game mode that doesn't cost any stamina to enter. It's important that there's no cost to entry so that you can just mess around with different synergies and make your characters feel broken. And while the inclusion of both of these, especially Simulated Universe, makes Star Rail's endgame a step up from Genshin's, somehow, after 2 years, there's no getting around what feels like a brick wall of progression once you beat the main story. Now make no mistake, this isn't a bug, it's a feature. If these were problems that MiHoYo wanted to address, they easily could. Just make stamina regenerate faster, or give me an actual blue drop when I spend 6 hours worth of stamina on this stupid node, MiHoYo. But it seems like this is how the game was made to be experienced, with story and exploration being the main focus, and things like endgame progression being a secondary thing, made only to keep you on a slow daily grind. To be fair, I blew through the main story like a raccoon addicted to stamina potions, so I probably experienced everything that the launch had to offer much faster than most. The game no doubt has a massive casual audience that is slowly taking their time, and likely won't experience too much of this content drought before the next patch or event comes out. I strongly suggest that if you do play Star Rail, take your time. There is no holy grail at the end of this tunnel, just a sad, sad waiting room for patch 1.1. Surprisingly, I don't want to end this video negatively, so let me briefly gush about some of the small things that I appreciated while gaining this new addiction. For starters, just look at it.
Radiant Spirit, heed my word. Show no mercy!
The seemingly endless amount of money that Genshin managed to milk out of you people was certainly put to good use, because frankly, the game looks amazing. Especially when you remember that this is a mobile game, one so well optimized that it works on my 6-year-old phone from a company that doesn't even make phones anymore. And even on that dinosaur, the game runs fine, and I've only encountered 1 or 2 small bugs over my entire playthrough of the story. You might say that a game looking and running fine is me praising it for reaching an industry standard. Counter argument. Is that really today's industry standard? Is it really? In general, the aesthetics, presentation, and as you might have noticed, the music of Honkai Star Rail are absolutely top tier. The combat animations feel responsive and smooth, the enemy designs are creative and expressive, the load times are short, and perhaps most importantly, at the end of the day, did I enjoy my time with Honkai Choo Choo Raccoon City Edition? Absolutely yes. Do I recommend that you play it?
I don't know.
Look, it still has the Hoyoverse Gacha. It has simple turn-based combat. It has no real endgame. But it does make noticeable improvements to all of these systems, not you, and wraps them up in a very polished package that clearly had a lot of love and care put into it. I can understand why some Zoomers called this game mid, but if anything that I've shown in this video sounds appealing to you, then I heavily recommend Honkai Star Rail, because while the game does have its fair share of flaws, it has a lot to enjoy and even more to be excited about in the future, if they don't find a way to screw it up. Now like and subscribe to this dead channel so I can turn your ad money into a Kafka fund.